Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Professor, a viewer-supported feature where we respond to your questions on economics, on history, on political philosophy, and on culture, including architecture. I want a question on architecture so I can talk about the soul-destroying modernity of underground parking garages.
Okay.
Compare those to the Temple of Hatshepsut and tell me who the barbarian is. Just at random.
Is that a hint? It
could happen.
Suggesting, maybe? Anyway, that's a hint, people. Go ahead. Here's a question, meanwhile, from Thomas, who says that, electoral reform is on people's minds a lot. And he's of the view, of course, and I agree with him, that if you have a population that believes in limited government and freedom, your system is going to be good because most of the people want those ideas respected. But if you have a population where those ideals are not particularly shared, then your voting system also will not matter because no system will save you if the population doesn't believe in freedom and limited government. But meanwhile, he says, since it's on people's minds, I would like your opinion on two systems. One is the stochastic elections, where in each riding you pick a ballot at random and the person on that ballot is the MP for that riding. And two, the sortition, where legislators are chosen at random from the general population. And he says the sortition method, and probably also the first one, the stochastic elections, would require separating the executive branch from the legislature. And he's asking, would that be a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, first of all, I like the fact that that question contained the word stochastic. But I am not enamored of the stochastic method of choosing legislators for reasons I'll explain after I've dealt with a number of the other points that you usefully raise. To begin with, the idea that institutions aren't that important because what really counts is whether you have a populace that loves liberty or not. And I would respond that a love of liberty is necessary, but it's not sufficient. That even with a populace that loves liberty, the wrong kind of institutions can lead to excessive growth of government and a decay in civic virtue. But if people don't love liberty, it's true, it doesn't matter what. The American Constitution was adopted in any number of Latin American republics essentially verbatim and produced dramatically different results. And this reminds me, there's a line which I believe originated with Andrew Breitbart. He was certainly fond of saying it, that politics is downstream from culture. And that if we want to change politics, we must change the culture. But to get back to the American Constitution, in 1789, the Americans had gone through a number of upheavals. They were dealing with a decay in the traditional British system of liberty, which they had long prized. They created and adopted a new set of institutions, of people who loved liberty, but they were very careful how they designed those institutions to make sure that they did not reward demagoguery, that they created a government that could not, in principle, plunder the treasury at the behest of voters, to do all kinds of things that would tend to keep the wrong kind of politics in check. And yet, as Learned Hand would later observe, liberty lies in the hearts of men and women. And if it dies there, no paper constitution, no written law can save it. So yes, we have to start by loving liberty, but once we do, we need to create institutions that preserve liberty. Now, as for separating executive and legislature, yes, it is critical. The Americans, you might think, did it. But that's not quite right. What the Americans did was preserve it. They were convinced that a major problem in Britain in the 18th century is that the executive and the legislature were no longer separate, as they had been from the first appearance of Parliament as a formal body in the 13th century. The executive had seduced the legislature and made it essentially an appendage. And that surely is something that Canadians recognize in our own time as a major problem. And in our Fix the Constitution project, True, Strong and Free, we will definitely be addressing that issue. We need to restore the legislature as the guardian of the people's liberties, as a check on the executive, not as an executive tool for extracting money and compliance from the population through manufacturing the appearance of consent. I mean, you look at modern political platforms. These promises, they haven't the slightest intention of keeping them, nor are they running by attempting to appeal to what the people actually think. They are attempting to massage what the people seem to think into a facsimile of support for the program they're thinking of carrying out, which they're not sincere about, so that once they get power, they can do what they think is best with no regard for the people. And the reason I don't like the stochastic or sortition method is that the idea, going back to the first parliament in which the common people are represented, that's Montfort's model parliament in 1265, is that we choose the people we think most likely to protect our interests against the overweening presumption. Well, it was always the executive branch, now it's the judiciary as well. We need to choose legislators with whom we identify. Now, the funny thing, if you did draw legislators at random, you'd get normal people. Was it William F. Buckley said he'd rather be governed by the first 400 names in the Boston phone book than the faculty at Harvard? Well, so would I. But a random draw would it wouldn't be the first 100 names, but essentially it would be a random sampling from the phone book. And you kids with typing with your thumbs, a phone book is this paper thing that used to exist and list people's phone numbers, and kids could sit on it if they were too small to reach the table.
Really?
I digress. Anyway, the point is there is something to be said for random. But self-government isn't about randomness. It's about we the people loving freedom and choosing champions of freedom and sending them to Parliament to stand up for our rights, which was a difficult and hazardous duty. People didn't want to be chosen as MP in the 16th century. How would you like to be sent from some remote part of England to defy Henry VIII to his face? This was a man who would stroke your hair while telling you that if his bill wasn't passed, your head would be off tomorrow, and mean it. It was very hard to maintain the independence of Parliament, and even traveling back and forth was difficult and dangerous, but people did it because their neighbours trusted them. That's the system that we need to get back, where MPs are not agents of Ottawa in the riding, but agents of the riding in Ottawa. And to do that, I think the Americans have a great system. If liberty is in your heart, the American system will work. Increasingly, I fear it isn't even there. But parliamentary democracy, constitutional monarchy is also a great system, provided the government is limited. That's our system. We should repair it, not fundamentally alter it, but put it back on its foundations. And I say again, the website is fixtheconstitution.ca. If you're not already a backer, please support that project. If you are, thank you very much for helping us make our work possible. And the same is true of this podcast. We are reliant on your support to keep it going. So visit johnrobson.ca and make a small monthly pledge so we can continue to discuss these issues and use the word stochastic, which I do like.
All right. And in the meantime, if you have a question about, I don't know, parking lots?
I was just thinking maybe architecture.
Maybe. That would be a great idea, because then he'd stop talking about it and then we can move on to something else. So, no, is that like the Leafs? We're stuck with this?
We're not talking about the Leafs.
All right, then. People, if you want to get in on the fun and ask your question to the professor, the URL on your screen will take you to the page where everything is explained. Thanks, and see you next time.